Hi, my name is Emily Wirzba, and I am FCNL's lobbyist working on climate change in the environment. And I'm really excited to talk to you all today about the importance of telling your own personal story in a lobby visit. We've found through our experience on the Hill that often the most effective way to connect with a member and to change their mind on an issue is to tell a personal story about how their issue affects you and your community locally. So I want to introduce to you all a framework that I often use in my own lobbying to kind of help break down an effective way to guide and direct your story. So I like to think of this broken up into facts, myths, and values. So for example, facts is looking at the reality of how the issue affects you and your community. What is the potential impact and how are you experiencing it? When you think about myths, you're thinking about what's maybe a contested narrative, a different way that the member of Congress might view this piece of legislation and how it affects that district. And then the values is the underlying core values and ethics and morals that are guiding and motivating a member of Congress and their worldview. So I want to give you a quick example of how this relates to my own climate change work. A fact is that human activity is causing climate change. A myth around this might be that our Earth isn't actually warming and that it's part of a natural cyclical event. But maybe an underlying value if a member of Congress believes that myth has less to do with the science and more to do with the way that they view the economy and this idea that government intervention in the economy is not a good thing and that the market should be free. So maybe that core value is actually what's motivating a member rather than their belief in science, for an example. So I want to tell you a quick story of how one of our constituents used their personal story in a very effective way to connect to a member of Congress's core values. A group of students was lobbying the former member of Congress from Pennsylvania, Mike Fitzpatrick, talking about climate change. And one of the students in that visit talked about his own asthma and how he was nervous that climate change would make asthma worse and make it harder for him to play soccer. He also talked about all the thousands of other children that also have asthma in Pennsylvania. And so he was able to connect this to Congressman Fitzpatrick's own family values because the congressman has 6 children himself. And he was deeply motivated by youth and children issues and public health. And so by telling the story, he was really able to speak to the congressman about why climate change was so important. And it was in a way that the member of Congress could really hear and listen to what he was having to say. So I want us to think for a minute now about our own personal stories. When you first decided to lobby on a particular issue, what was it that motivated you to pick that topic? What was it about your own core values, maybe your religious beliefs, or maybe a personal experience that you or a friend or family member have had with that particular issue? Why did you choose to lobby on this issue? Think about what those core values are that motivate you to care. And then think about how can you connect your own core values and your own personal story to maybe the core values that your member of Congress holds. So try to figure out what that intersection is, and you'll find that that will be the most effective way to actually have your member of Congress truly hear and resonate with the story that you tell. So we're going to now spend a few minutes hearing from other lobbyists at FCNL, some of their effective stories that they've seen to be really influential in lobbying. So I hope that will be helpful to you.
Hi, I'm Hannah, and I work on immigration policy here at FCNL. And I think the most powerful example of stories affecting legislators is undocumented young people in the United States who grew up undocumented with no pathway forward towards legal status or eventual citizenship. So about 15 years ago, there was a woman in Illinois who approached Senator Durbin about her situation being an undocumented woman in this predicament. And he was so impacted by her story and the stories of hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of other young people in this same situation that he introduced what's called the DREAM Act. And for the last 15 years, he has reintroduced this DREAM Act. He's sought out bipartisan co-sponsorship of it. He's gone as far as to lobby the administrative branch to create the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, which is now in place. And that story and those thousands of other stories have also led to a current piece of legislation, which is the Bipartisan Bridge Act, which would make this program, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, a congressional program of protection. So this 15-year-long campaign that's built on people's personal stories has really affected the way that legislators from all across the aisle, from the administrative branch branch, to the congressional branch, to the judicial branch, how they're thinking about immigration and the ways that policies impact people. It's incredibly powerful, and there are stories like that all over the place, and that's the impact that it's had on immigration and how we talk about it today.
Hi, my name is Maya Zwirling, and I'm the National Field Organizer with the Friends Committee on National Legislation. I'm so excited to share with you a bit about how your stories can have a really big impact, and to give you an example about of what I've seen the impact can be in my own work. So recently we had hundreds of advocates come to Washington, D.C. to lobby against in support of Medicaid and programs that serve the most vulnerable, and against healthcare, this healthcare bill that was coming up. So two of the advocates that I've worked really close with, they went to lobby their representative's office, who was a Tea Party member. And going in, they were not expecting to find someone who they could see much common ground with. Of course, the Tea Party is pretty much known for having a lot of opposition to Obamacare, as they call it, and to federal healthcare services. And so they were expecting to find a lot of pushback in that space. And they went and they sat down with the representative staff member, and they told her about what an impact Medicaid has had for their own lives, for both the parents and the kid, in terms of how do they access healthcare, that needs to be a human right, and that for them, that has allowed them access despite having chronic illness, despite all the other obstacles that come in the way in terms of healthcare. And this opened up a really great conversation with the staff member and with these advocates. And by the end of the meeting, they were seeing that potentially this could be a member of Congress who votes against AHCA in favor of the way we wanted them to vote. And the staff member said actually that stories across the country were making a big difference for the representative in terms of potentially voting in that direction. So they left with a lot of optimism for potentially having a representative who could vote in their way. And just a few hours later, they found out that their representative came out against this bill for Medicaid for all, or at least for Medicaid in this circumstance. And so this is just one of the many stories that I think exemplifies how impactful your stories can be, and that they're actually what your members of Congress need to hear in order to take brave stances on all issues. So